Hey everybody, welcome back. This is a test, but we'll be going down and doing the intro to CSS. Boom. In previous lessons, you learned how to write HTML that determines how a web page is structured. The next step is to make the structured look good with some style, which is exactly what CSS is for. In the next few lessons, we're going to focus on what we believe are some foundational CSS concepts, things that everyone should know from the beginning, whether you are just starting or need a refresher. Lesson overview. This section contains a general overview of topics that you will learn in this session. Add styles to HTML with CSS, understand how to use the class and ID attributes, and add styles to specific elements using the correct selectors. And as we move through this, I'm going to be pulling up a text editor and we're going to be doing some of this stuff. So first off, basic syntax. At the most basic level, CSS is made up of various rules. These rules are made up of a selector, more on this in a bit, and a semicolon separated list of declarations, with each of those declarations being made up of a property pair or a property value pair. So you have your selector, you have a property, colon, value, semicolon, and then close. And then it says here, note, a div is one of the basic HTML elements. It is an empty container. In general, it is best to use other tags such as H1 or P for content in your projects. But as we learn more about CSS, you'll learn that there are many cases where the thing you need is just a container for other elements. Many of our exercises use plain div for simplicity. Later lessons will go into much more depth about when it is appropriate to use the various HTML elements. All right, so selectors. Selectors refer to HTML elements to which CSS rules apply. They're what is actually being selected for each rule. The following subsections don't cover every selector available because there's a lot, but they are by far the most common and the ones you should get comfortable using first. So first of all, you have the universal selector, which is this star value with empty elements, hence the name. The universal selector will select elements of any type, hence the name universal. And the syntax for it is a simple asterisk. Oh, not a star, asterisk. In the example below, every element would have the color purple style applied to it. So yeah, type selectors. Okay, so the star selector. So I would just want to move through this with you guys. So what I'm going to do is bring up Visual Studio Code. And I'm just going to move this to the side. I'm going to create a new thing. And we're just going to make this an HTML document. And let's just copy this hello world again. Okay, bye. We can throw this in here. We want to throw it inside of a body element. Just out of habit, I do these kinds of things because it's standard. I highlight everything and press tab in Visual Studio Code to get them all like that. So now if we save this and we save it to the desktop and we save it as, we'll just call it index.html. Now if we were to open up here and drag index into our browser, I'm using Brave browser, we'll see that this pops up. So this is our thing. So what were they saying about the universal selector? Well, if we wanted to turn all of this purple, what we could do is put a head element in here and then go style and then close that. And then within it, we could go asterisk and then color purple. So now, before I save this, I'm going to save it here. Before I refresh this page, you can see that it's black. And if we refresh, it's color purple. Okay, HEAD. That's important. Okay, so now if we save that and we refresh, it still doesn't work. Color purple. Font color. Oh, I see. Not head. It needs to be header. Okay, so here we go, header. And if we save that, refresh, it still doesn't work. Body, style, head. Okay, so let's look at this example to see what I'm doing wrong. I actually just haven't done doing this kind of thing in a while. Head, yeah. Head, style. Within the style, you have here. So we can make it style is equal to type is equal to text / CSS. Ha! Do you guys see the error? STYLE. Okay, so now if we save that, we have our universal selector. We don't need it to be color. Save it. And then if we come over here, it turns purple, and this is wrapped up in there. So yeah, syntax is important. I haven't written CSS for a while, so this is a nice overview for me. But that's what it means by universal selector. There's a div, a p, and a div, and it's all turning purple. If we were to make this div, oops, not that part, this part here. If we were to make all the divs purple, what we see is high will turn back to black. You see high is back to black. And so that's how the universal selector works. It gets all the but with the universal selector, everything turns purple. Cool. So hope I explained that. Okay, now we get rid of this. Type selectors. Type selector or element selector will select all elements of a given element type, and the syntax is just the same as the element. Okay, so it gives us this, and now it says div for color white. And so yeah, if we change this to div and we made it white, what do you think is going to happen? Hello world, hello again, and okay bye are all going to look as if they're invisible because it's white on a white background. Cool. Here are 3 div elements that would be selected with the p element wouldn't be. That's what they're saying. The p element meaning high. Yeah, and if we made this red, we would see that those ones were red. Cool. Class selector. Class selectors will select all elements with given class, which is just an attribute you place on an HTML element. Here's how you add a class to an HTML tag and select it in CSS. So here we've got alert text. So we'll just steal this from them. Please agree to this service. And it has alert text in this class element. And now it's important to remember that when you're working with, we'll change this one back to, yeah, when you're working with classes, they start with periods. Whereas IDs, which we'll probably learn about later, start with a pound key. But the way I remember it is classes have, you have like 0 period and second period in your classes. And so now what would we do? Add this here. Let's say we wanted to make the alert text, and we wanted to make it green. Cool. So now if we save this and we come over here, we should see please agree to our terms of service in green. Cool. That's how it works. So we're using a class selector in our CSS to style this font as green. Cool. Note that the syntax for class selectors, a period immediately followed by a case-sensitive value of the class attribute. Classes aren't required to be specific to a particular element, so you can use the same class on as many elements as you want. Another thing you can do with the class attribute is to add multiple classes to a single element as a space-separated list, such as severe alert and an alert text. Since white space is used to separate class names like this, you should never use spaces for multi-worded names and should use a hyphen instead. So what are they saying? Instead of using, you wouldn't want to be like severe alert because that would be 2 different selectors. Servers, severe and alert. So when you put it in like that. And for example, we could also make it severe alert. We could be like, why is that not working? And then we would say font family. And we could be like sans, like that. And now we see that it's changed font. So we've used our class, our selector, so it's getting the alert text, it's green, but then it's also getting this one. And that's the cascading style to CSS, cascading style sheet. But their point is that you don't want to try to make it like severe alert because then this will not work. Cool, that's the point of that one. All right, just like I expected. ID selectors. ID selectors are similar to class selectors. They select an element with a given ID, which is another attribute you place in the HTML element. The major difference between classes and IDs is that the element can only have one ID. It cannot be repeated on a single page and should not contain any white space. So here we're going to do the div with the title. So the ID is title, and you'll see that they add the CSS selector is with a pound key. So if it's ID, it goes to pound. But if it's class, it starts with a period. And yeah, we'll set the title to, what do they want to make it? Red. Let's make it pink. So background color. And you can just hit tab in Visual Studio Code and it'll autofill. Well, let's make it pink for fun. Okay, so now if we come back over to our page, we want to see please agree to our terms of service in pink down at the bottom, or at the top, because it's the ID of title. So my awesome 90s page. And yeah, it's still red because we have the div as set to red. So I'm going to get rid of that now. And then we'll see that it's black, which is just the default. So for IDs, instead of a period, we use a hashtag immediately followed by a case-sensitive value of the ID attribute. A common pitfall is people overusing the ID attribute when they don't necessarily need to, and when classes will suffice. While there are cases where using an ID makes sense or is needed, such as taking advantage of specifying or having links redirect to a section on a current page, you should use IDs sparingly, if at all. All right, now we're moving on to the group selector, the grouping selector. What if we have two groups of elements that share some of the style declarations? So we have read and unread. So the color is white, the background color is black. The color is white and the background color is black. Both our read and unread selectors share the color white and background color black declarations, but otherwise have several of their own unique declarations. To cut down on repetition, we can group these two selectors together as comma separated lists. Oh, I see what they're saying. So instead of having duplicate ones like this, you can cut down on them by, if you want read and unread to be in there, you can basically just get rid of all this and add a comma. And now you've got both of them having the same selectors, the same CSS class applying to the same selectors. Both examples above, with and without grouping, will have the same result, but the second example reduces repetition of declarations and makes it easier to edit either the color or the background color for both classes at once. So yeah, you'll see giant CSS files when you get into programming, and it's nice to not to be able to bring them together. So now we've got chaining selectors. Another way to use selectors is to chain them as a list without any separation. Let's say we have the following HTML. So we have subsection header and we have subsection preview. This one says latest posts in it, and this one says this is a preview from a post, might go. Cool, so we'll copy this. We'll get rid of all these guys. Save this, and then we'll get rid of all of our CSS selectors as well, so we have a clean page to work with. So if I refresh here, we see latest posts, and then this is where a preview of the post might go. We have two elements with subsection. So both of them have subsection elements. One has header and one has preview as well. We have two elements with subsection class that have some sort of unique styles. But what if we only want to apply a separate rule to an element that also has header as a second class? Well, we could chain both of the classes together in our CSS like this. So yeah, these are classes and they're both subsection and header. We'll see where they're going with this. Oops. All right, and if we save that and we come over here, we'll see that subsection and header are both latest post. So latest post turns red while this one stays there because it's subsection and preview. So it must match both, otherwise it won't match at all. What subsection.header does is selects any element with both subsection and header classes. Notice that there isn't any space between subsection and .header class selectors. This syntax basically works for chaining any combination of selectors except for chaining more than one type selector. So yeah, this is very specific. It's only going to color red the things that have both subsection and header. What subsection? Yeah, we already did that. This can also be used to chain a class and an ID as shown below. So here we've got subsection header, latest post, subsection and ID preview. All right, let's throw this in there. Oh, and this is all within its own div, so we can get rid of all of this. So we can look at that. If this is where a preview post will go. Okay, latest posts. And so we've got a class of subsection and an ID of preview. And so here it's saying, okay, cool. So this would be our CSS. We'll use this to undo there. Cool. And so what do you think is going to happen here? I've saved this file. And then in here, what do you think is going to happen, right? Latest post should probably turn red. And subsection with ID of preview, subsection ID preview should turn blue. Great, red, white, and blue. In general, you can't chain more than one type selector since an element can't be two different types at once. For example, chaining two type selectors like div and p would give us the selector div p, which wouldn't work since the selector would try to find literally div p elements, which doesn't exist. Cool. Descendant combinator. Combinations allow us to combine multiple selectors differently than either grouping or chaining them as they show a relationship between the two selectors. There are 4 types of combinations in total, but for right now we're going to only show you the descendant combinator, which is represented in CSS by a single space between selectors. A descendant combinator will only cause elements that match the last selector to be selected if they have an ancestor, parent, grandparent, etc. that matches the previous selector. So something like ancestor.child would select an element with the class child if it had an ancestor with the class ancestor. Another way to think of this is that child will only be selected if it is nestled inside ancestor, regardless of how deep that nesting is. Take a quick look at the example below and see if you can tell which elements would be selected based on the CSS rule provided. Okay, let's take a guess. So, bust this guy into here. Class contents BC. Some declaration. Contents class B and C would be selected, but the last element D wouldn't be. Was your guess correct? Okay, so I don't know why they made it A. Let's make this a P element of A. And this one a B element of B. C element. C. This one, D. Okay, so now if we look here, we refresh, we see we got A, B, C, D. And let's say we want to do, and for our ancestor, what we'll do is we'll just make the color blue. Okay, so now if we save this, what's it saying? Which one do you think? In the above example, the two example with the elements of the contents, B and C. So if we look here, we see ancestor and contents. Ancestor and contents. Now because it's a cascading style sheet, which one do you think will happen? It's ancestor. So A won't be there, right? But B, C, and D will turn blue because they have both the ancestor and the contents. That's my guess. Let's find out. Oh, yeah, okay. So A stayed the same because it only has ancestor, but within here we have contents, which is for B. And then C also has this one. This formatting's strange, it's confusing. So C turns blue as well, even though it's twice within this CSS sheet. But then D, it starts once the ancestor is gone. Oh no, but D should still turn blue. Oh, so maybe it doubles up and that's why it doesn't happen? Huh. Contents, ancestor contents. In the above example, the first two elements with contents, class B and C, would be selected, but the last element, D, would not be. Was your guess correct? The two elements with contents, class. Did we get this right? Look at that. Contents B, contents C. and D's not. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Why is not D? Because D is with, okay, because ancestor class only holds A, B, and C, whereas this one's not. Now if we were to add ancestor here, and save that, we would see, it didn't turn V. Ancestor class. I would have thought that one would have worked as well. Cool, so that's a lesson on the cascading style sheet. I'm not a master of CSS, so. There's really no limit to how many combinations you can add to a rule. So .1, .2, .3, .4 would be totally valid. This would just select an element that has a class of 4. It has the ancestor with a class of 3, and it has an ancestor with its own class of 2, and so on. You generally want to avoid trying to select elements that need this level of nesting, though as it can get pretty confusing and long, it can cause issues when it comes to specificity. All right, moving on. Properties to get started with. There are some CSS properties that you're going to be using all the time, or at very least more often than not. We're going to introduce you to several of these properties, though this is by no means a complete list. Learning the following properties will be enough to help you get started. Color and background color. The color property sets an element's text color, while background color sets, well, the background color of the element. I guess we're done here. Almost both of these properties can accept one of several kinds of values. A common one is a keyword, such as the actual color name like red or the transparent keyword. They also accept hex, RGB, and HSL values, which you may be familiar with if you've ever done a Photoshop program or a site where you could customize your profile colors. Okay, so here what we're doing, we're setting a P element to have a hex example, a RGB example, and then an HSL example. Take a look at the CSS legal color values to see how you can adjust the opacity of these colors by adding an alpha value. Alpha value. Hex for transparency. Red transparency. Ooh, neat. Okay. What do they say about alpha value though? Predefined colors. Current. All right. I don't know exactly how that works. Typographic. So yeah, what does this do? So yeah, we'll just make a P element in here. And then we'll say useful programmer. Right? And so if we come over here, we'll see that it's just like that. It doesn't have the class of ancestors, so the blue gets ignored. And so let's just first take this one. What do you think this one's going to do? I have no idea because, well, I guess I do because it cheats and it tells us this. So 1100FF, if we save this and then we go back to our thing, it's going to turn it blue. Cool. And so what do you think this one's going to be? We don't have to worry about that. Oh, look, it's going to be purple. That's just the beauty of Visual Studio Code. But if we save it and then we come over here, we'll see that it's purple. And then this one, what do you think this one's going to be? P element, HSL, it's kind of like a red color. Cool. Refresh it. So yeah, I'm just saving this and then coming back and refreshing this page. Cool. So take a quick look at blah, blah, blah. We already did that one. Typography basics and text-align. Font family can be a single value or a comma-separated list of values that determine what font an element uses. Each font will fall into one of two categories, either a font family name like Times New Roman. So if we were to do font family and set this to Times New Roman and save that, what's the red one is now going to be there. Oh, it didn't work. Font family, Times New Roman. I spelled that right. Well, let's see if we can just get it. Font family, Times New Roman. Apparently we need this sans serif in there as well. And it's not loading. The P element is not loading. Save. Is it? Let's, I can press Command and then the question mark key for the backslash, and that'll comment this out. Let's see if we can see a difference. Well, let's see if we make it a different type of font. So we get rid of the CSS comment, and make it like a more dramatic font. Font family. Helvetica. Oh, it doesn't need the... Oh, okay. So it would be Times New Roman. No, it doesn't like the commas. Huh. Arial. That's going to be the basic one. But what if we just wanted it to be Helvetica? Or Franklin Gothic. Let's try that. Yeah. So this is how you set the fonts. I don't know why Times New Roman wasn't working. Or a generic family name like serif. I wonder what serif does. So if we go over here. Yeah, see, that's different. If we comment this out, we refresh. Did that make a difference? Didn't make a difference. Anyways, we'll keep moving. If a browser cannot find or does not support the first font in a list, it will use the next one and the next one on until it finds a supported and valid font. This is why it's best practice to include a list of values for this property, starting with the font you want to use, want to be used most, but ending with a generic font as a fallback. So font family, Times New Roman, serif. Now I'm thinking because Times New Roman doesn't change anything, serif won't change anything. But if we made this one Helvetica and sans serif, how about impact? This is a very dramatic one. Yeah, so impact, and like if it doesn't have impact, it might do this Hattenschweiler, and then Arial bold, and then finally sans serif. So it falls back. So when you have a list of fonts, it's going to constantly fall back. Now, if you were to look at the, I right click and then go down to inspect to see this. On these, we'll see over here in this tab right here, if we search for the P element, it's going to show us that, oh, it's just got sizing. So they probably have some other selector doing the font. We could look for font family, and we'll see that they're using Inter Helvetica New. And so you see the font here, and if we were to do that here, then we would have the same font as them. So yeah, I hope this is not too detailed, but that's how I look at things. Font, if the browser can, font size will, as the property name suggests, set the size of the font. When giving a value to this property, the value should not contain white spaces, e.g. font size 22px has no spaces between 22px. So yeah, so here we've got it set to, let's take it back to impact because that was pretty much fun to look at. And now if we go to, was it font size? Yeah. If we change font size to be 40 pixels, expected a semicolon. There's no semicolon back here. All right, so if we save that, now we've got big words. And they're saying that in there, they're saying that if you put a space in here, then it won't work. It'll go back. So we want to keep it 40px, no spaces. Cool. Font weight affects the boldness of the text. Assuming the font supports the specific weight, the value can be a keyword, e.g. font weight is equal to bold. We'll put that in here for now, but we won't do it. Or a number between 1 and 1,000 for font weight 700, the equivalent of bold. Usually the numeric value will be incremented from 1 to 900, though this will depend on the font. Okay, so I've saved this, but I haven't refreshed the page. So if I refresh the page, it looks kind of irregular. So we'll comment this out, and then, okay, cool. We can see the font size is 40 and the weight's bold. And if we were to comment out font weight bold, we'll see it's not bold anymore. And it looks like it can go anywhere from 100 to 900. So let's check it to see what happens if it's at 100. That looks thin. And if it's 900, super fat. And if it's 500, medium fat. Cool. Text align will align the text horizontally with an element. You can use the common keywords you may have come across in the word processor as a value for this property. So text align center. So if we add text align center here, and we save that and we refresh, it centers the text. Cool. Image height and width. Images aren't the only elements that can adjust the height and width on, but we want to focus on them specifically in this case. By default, an image element's height and width values will be the same as the actual image's height and width. If you wanted to adjust the size of the image without causing it to lose its proportion, you would use a value of auto for the height property and adjust the width values. So here we have image, height, and width. For example, if an image original size was 500 pixels height and 1000 width, using the above CSS would result in a height of 250 pixels. Why is that? 500 is equally divisible, so it's 5 to 10, right? 5 over 10 is 1/2. So if you change it to 250 and its original size was 500 pixels, then you would reduce it to that level. So let's play a little game. Let's add an image tag here. So yeah, so let's do image, and then we want to make the source, and I'm going to set that equal to the same page. Now my image is right here on the desktop with my index file. So what we want to do is go // and then the image is called George. So we're trying to get this image onto this page. So it's george.png. Cool. So now if we save that and refresh, we'll see that it's very big. So if we come back over here and we say we want to change our image CSS, let's make it a width of, well, we could do 500. Let's make it 200 so that it's small so we can see the difference in the change. So this is the way it was. Oh, this is the way, yeah. Anyways, I just did it really quickly. So I saved here and then I refreshed here. So now what if we make it 1000 and we refresh, we'll see that it's huge. Now, what if we make the height like 80 pixels? If we make it 80 pixels, then it's super distorted. What if we can make this maybe 20? No, 150 pixels. And we save that and we refresh, we'll see that we still have a distorted image right there. So that's why they want you to do auto, which makes it so it stays proportional. And we can just make this 500 pixels. Cool, so we're back to there. Yeah, so that's how this works. I wonder what happens if you go auto and you make this 200 px. It's going to be the same, right? Yeah. If we make it 800, it's going to be big. Cool. These properties work in conjunction with the height and width attributes in the HTML. It's best to include both of these properties and HTML attributes for image elements. Even if you don't plan on adjusting the value of the image file's original ones, when these values aren't included, if an image takes longer to load than the rest of the page contents, it won't take up any space on the page at first, but will suddenly cause a dramatic shift of the other page content once it does load. Explicitly stating a height and width prevents this from happening, as space will be reserved on the page and appear blank until the image loads. Okay, cool. So CSS, when you load a web page, because this web page is so minuscule, it's tiny. For that reason, the CSS and the HTML load essentially immediately. But if you look at pages like this, and you look at their source files, and you look at the CSS, you'll see that oftentimes these CSS files are tremendous, right? So look at this. This one has, and even though a computer can read 6,711 lines really quickly, it still takes longer to load. So sometimes loading speeds will affect the look of your website as you're developing. And so that's what they're talking about with this paragraph here. All right, cool. So we're moving on to adding CSS to HTML. Now that we've learned some basic syntax, you might be wondering how to add all the CSS to our HTML. We kind of cheated on this one because we've already been doing that. But there are 3 methods to do so. You can use external CSS. External CSS is the most common method you will come across, and it involves creating a separate file for CSS and linking it inside of an HTML's opening and closing heads tags with a void link element. So yeah, this is if you want to use the internet to access a style sheet that's outside of here. So if we were to inspect this page here, and we went up to the head element, this looks hard-coded. No, script. This might not be a good example. Script. These are all JavaScript things. We'll go over that in the future. But you can just use a link to another CSS page somewhere else on the internet. So this is a very common way to do it. Yeah. And then I don't know why they added this in here as well, because this is just some more default CSS. Style.css. Oh, okay. I see what they're saying. So one thing that you could do is, say you wanted to get rid of these, you could start a new file, right? So you're in your thing. You see you're on the desktop. Oh, no, I'm not on the desktop. And now say we wanted to, we've got our index here and we've got our image here. But say we wanted to make a new style sheet. We could call this styles.css. And we just do touch. And now open styles.css. Oh, don't do this to me. So we want to open it in the application of Visual Studio Code. And we want to open styles. So I'm using Visual Studio Code to open styles.css. And then in here, we paste in our stuff. Now I haven't saved this yet, and we haven't linked it yet. So I can save this now. And if we refresh, we'll see that the styles are all gone. We've removed them here and we saved them. Now, if we wanted to bring in this file, so I'll save this. And now what we can do is import this. So we can be like link rel equals a style sheet. Style sheet. I guess it has to be single double quotes. No, it just doesn't like the fact that it hasn't been. And then href is equal to styles.css. Head. Oh, okay, so we're within the style block. We want to get rid of this. So now what we're telling this page is to say, when you look for your styles, go to this page, this text right here. And this will get us our thing. So we've saved this and we've saved this. And once we come over here, we refresh, we see that our styles are back. So you can use linking to get to the style sheet. And so this is this is the most common way to do things. So first we add the void, opening and closing head tags on the HTML file. The anchor attribute is the location of the CSS file, either an absolute URL or what you'll be utilizing a URL relative to the location of the HTML file. So yeah, because we're in the same page. Now say this was in a folder like styles. If we list it out and now we want to move styles.css to styles/styles.css. So from a Finder perspective, what we've done is we've moved the styles, this guy, from there to there. That's what I did with this command line. It's the same thing. And now if we come back here, we're going to see that it doesn't work, right? Because we've broken it. Why is that? Well, now we need to go styles. It needs to be styles/styles.css because it's within the folder structure of that. And so now we see that it's come back. I hope that wasn't too detailed, but this is a very important element of learning web development. Then inside of the newly created style CSS file, we have the selector, the div, and the p. Well, we didn't do that. We just made it a p and an image, but we can see that this plays over. So I'm not going to do that. Followed by a pair of opening and closing curly bracket, which create a declaration block. Finally, we place any declarations inside the declaration block with the color white. And for our example, we have the width of auto and the font size. With the color being the property of white being the value and the background color of black. Again, we're not going to do that right now. A note on file name. Style.css is just what we went with as the file name here. You can name the file whatever you want as long as the file type is .css. So you need to have the .css on it. Otherwise, the computer won't realize that it's a CSS file and it just won't work. though style or styles is most commonly used. A couple of pros to this method are it keeps our HTML and CSS separated, which results in HTML file being smaller and making things look cleaner. So yeah, look cleaner is a funny thing that software guys always talk about, you know. Is that better than saying style like this and then having it here and you don't need that? Again, I spelled style wrong. You know, it does the same thing, right? But when you do have really large CSS files and your HTML, it's better to do it this way. So this is what they're talking about. You get rid of all of these lines of code and you just separate your CSS into one file and your HTML into the other. And it works the same. It keeps the H separated, which results in the files being smaller. And we only need to edit the CSS in one place, which is especially handy for websites with many pages that all share similar styles. So yeah, if you had 15, index and more pages, you still only have to adjust the style in one place and it fixes everything. So now we're at internal CSS. Internal CSS or embedded CSS involves adding CSS within the HTML file itself instead of creating a completely separate file. With the internal method, you place all the rules inside of a pair of opening and closing style tags, which are then placed inside the opening and closing head tags of your HTML file. Since the styles are being placed directly inside the head tags, we no longer need to link elements within them. So this is exactly what we were just talking about. Besides these differences, the syntax is exactly the same as the external method. So what they're saying is instead of linking it here with this, what you can do is remove this link and you can just go, I know we just went over this, but you can not have it there. You can put it here. Right? And then this style CSS is no longer linked, but we see our page still refreshes the same. So yeah, that's what they did here. Within the head, the style there. This method can be useful for adding unique styles to a single page of a website, but it doesn't keep things separate like the external method. And depending on how many rules and declarations there can be, it can cause HTML files to get pretty big. Inline CSS, this is the most inappropriate one to use. So inline CSS makes it possible to add styles directly to HTML elements, though this method isn't recommended. So within your body, you could just do it here. Yeah, so they're saying put your style here, and then it's separated by lists. So what would happen? Say we wanted to make it look exactly this way. What we could do is go into our image and go style and make that equal to this string. And within this, we would say our image is 400 and our width is auto. Add a space there. We'll just make it 800 so we can see the difference as we do it. And then instead of having our P element here, we could be like style. And then we go font size, font height, and our text align center. So if we save this, now our styles isn't even linked now, but now we can remove this. And if we save that, then we're going to see the same thing. We made the image height bigger, right? But the font size, let's make this 90 and make this 50. Now we're going to have a tiny image and really big lettering. So you can style inside here too. So that's all this is saying. It can be the same. But this is especially not great, especially once you get further on in your career. The first thing to note is that we won't actually use any selectors here since the styles are being added directly to the opening div tag. Next, so they're saying that you don't use the selectors because the selectors are gone. We don't even have any CSS anymore. This file is not part of the program, so there are no selectors. You just are styling specific elements. Next, we have style equals attribute. This is a value within the pair of quotation marks being the declarations. If you need to add a unique style for a single element, this method can work just fine. Generally, though, it isn't exactly A recommended way for adding CSS to HTML for a few reasons. It can quickly become pretty messy once you start adding a lot of declarations to a single element, causing your HTML file to become unnecessarily bloated. This becomes really hard to edit. Like imagine if you just wanted to edit the text and you had to go through all of this just to find the text. So it's better to use those other ones. If you want many elements to have the same style, you would have to copy and paste the same style to each individual element, causing a lot of unnecessary repetition and more bloat. Any inline CSS will override the other two methods, which can cause unexpected results. While we won't dive into it here, this can actually be taken advantage of. Inline CSS will override other. Oh, so sometimes it's useful because you can just really override things. So assignment. All right, let's get started. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to start making individual videos about how to accomplish each of these tasks. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.